and your action to serve this country in a very difficult, long war. But most of all, I'm proud of how much you wanted to help the Afghan people and what you were willing to do to go to that length. I'll say it again. I'm so proud of how far you were willing to go to help the Afghan people. And I think you have succeeded.
All right, I would love a translation. I would love to know what kind of code he might have been talking to his son there, although I have a feeling. Welcome back, Steve Malzberg Show. Joining us on the Malzberg panel is our friend. He's in studio. He's Ron Christie, former special assistant to George W. Bush. Also, of course, worked very closely with Vice President Dick Cheney, Republican strategist and columnist at the Daily Beast. And what else is on the card? And also in Washington, our Washington, D.C. Newsmax correspondent, John Gizzi, who, as he knows, makes me dizzy. Hello, John.
Hello, Steve. I got to think of something.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're both here. I'm glad you're both here. Okay, let me start with Ron. Ron, there are so many things here, so many questions. You have soldiers coming out now who said that this man was a deserter. You have the father tweeting out recently, then getting rid of it reportedly, that the goal is to free all Gitmo prisoners. You have the 5 Gitmo prisoners that were transferred, some say illegally. You have this little message from the Rose Garden, reportedly, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most compassionate, the father said to the son. There's so many things going on here. What's your read on all of this?
My read on all this is everything that we've seen, and good afternoon, Steve, about this administration. The truth sort of dribbles out when they want it to dribble out, and what they've told us originally doesn't always end up happening to be true at the end. Let's break this down a little bit. For one, they say that these 5 terrorists were prisoners. This is not a war. This is not an opportunity where you have the Geneva Convention. These are terrorists that should have been kept in Gitmo, and they were there for a reason. Number 2, you had a lot of feedback from the soldiers who were under a gag order, which I find ironic. They said, we can't talk about this person, but he walked off base. He did not get lost on patrol. So you say to yourself, was this guy a deserter that we lost 6 American lives for and then we traded 5 Taliban? It's a disgrace in my view.
Now, John, 6 soldiers died directly from the multi-week search for him. 8 soldiers died at a forward post in Afghanistan that was reportedly scheduled for a closure, but delayed it because assets were diverted for the search for the sergeant. And 2 soldiers were killed after resources were taken out of an area. This all according to CNN. There in Washington, D.C., a lot of reaction from Republicans, certainly on Capitol Hill. What's any reaction from Democrats?
No, I haven't heard any yet, but I can say the reaction from Republicans is going to be heard for a long time. Congressman Buck McKeon, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, and Senator Jim Inhofe, ranking member on the Senate Armed Services Committee, signed a joint letter protesting the means in which Sergeant Bergdahl was released and the downside of this whole event. Some of the events, as Ron points out, were tragic. My guess is we will see congressional hearings on this, and we're going to have a lot of questions brought out, including why no one in Congress was brought in on this when the deal was being made.
Well, you know, Ron, David Ignatius said on one of the shows yesterday that this deal has been talked about for about 4 years at least. They could have had this deal, and the former Leon Panetta, former Secretary of Defense, said, no way, I'm turning this down. So that means Hillary was aware of this, Panetta, Obama, and this is something, like I said, that's been going on for years and years and years, and yet no contact with Congress. So it's not like it just happened suddenly and they had to do it and they were rushed. They just didn't want to tell Congress about this.
They didn't want to tell Congress about this, and yet again, as you pointed out, they've known about this for years, but they said, oh, these are exigent circumstances. This soldier's health was at immediate risk. Nonsense. The National Defense Authorization Act specifically provides that the Congress has to be given a 30-day window of notification. The administration didn't. Why? Because I think they knew that if Congress had found out the more the details, they'd say, no way, we're not going to let these terrorists go for this individual who's being held under dubious claims of being a great patriot.
And John, Ron brought up a great point, something that I kind of brought up with Ari Fleischer earlier in the show, and that is, all of a sudden the administration wants it both ways. Now it's prisoners of war. We're swapping prisoners of war. war, yet these same Gitmo prisoners, they want to try in federal court here in New York City. So on one hand, they're not prisoners of war. Now all of a sudden they're prisoners of war. I'm confused.
I'm confused too. And remember, as was pointed out in the previous segment, we have not formally declared war on the Taliban or on any of the terrorist groups. I remember after 9/11, the then majority leader of the House, Dick Cheney, had a proposal for a Pearl Harbor type declaration of war against the state of terrorism. And it had widespread support, but it never surfaced. Under those circumstances, one could make a case for the prisoner exchange as well as for treatment at Gitmo. But that does not exist, and hence the Geneva Convention rules are not enforced. And again, it raises more questions about the trade of Sergeant Bergdahl for the five, who in all likelihood will go back to doing what they were doing before, and that's their business of terror.
And Ron, you know, we heard the father, and you know, I can't imagine as a father of a child, I can't imagine him being captured for 5 years or whatever. But he gave him this message. You know, most of all, I'm impressed by what you did, to the extent to which you went to help the Afghan people, and I think you've succeeded. Like, what is that? What is that?
I don't know. To be perfectly honest with you, Steve, I can't understand that. I understand the fact that the parents are, of course, ecstatic that their son is home, but the messages that are being sent by this family, they're being held up as some sort of, you know, heroic American family with this honorable young son who is being held captive. And I think as the American people find more and they learn more, they're going to discover that everything else with this administration, nothing is what it seems, unfortunately.
Yeah, John, you agree with that?
Yes, I do, and it would not surprise me if Mr. Bergdahl's words were vetted within the White House, because they sound very much like an endorsement of the same line that the president delivered to us in the Rose Garden when he proclaimed the American mission in Afghanistan a success and announced the gradual withdrawal timetable.
Good point, good point. All right, we're coming back. We got much more to talk about with the panel. If you want to weigh in on the issues of the day, folks, please do. And we're going to let you know how to do that. All you got to do is look at the screen and act accordingly.